IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Wednesday, August 14th. We are 17 days away from Notre Dame kicking off the 2024 season. I know y'all are excited. I'm certainly excited. Can't wait to get this season started and just find out how good this team is. You know, there's still so much to talk about. Plenty of things happening, all types of news. They're just it never stops. The news never stops, but it's all just talk until we can find out what this team is. But I do think that there's a lot of things that as we look at this team, there's a lot of things to be excited about. There's still some question marks and concerns. And so what I want to do today in advance of tomorrow's practice viewing, which will be our last practice viewing, is really just dive into several topics in regard to just this Notre Dame football team. And just so a scheduling note, we will not be doing a buy-sell hold today. I've been dealing with our dog Rita's very sick. Angela's at the emergency room with her now. Just haven't been able to take the time to make the cards and do all that kind of stuff for the buy-sell hold. But I'm going to reschedule it either for tomorrow or potentially like after the practice viewing is kind of my plan right now is to, I'm going to have actually one of our new writers is going to be with me tomorrow. Trevor Trowbridge is going to be on the show with me tomorrow. So we're going to talk about the practice, and then I'm what most likely we'll have the buy-sell hold after that. So that's what we'll do. So apologize for not getting that today, but I still have some very good stuff to talk with you guys about today, and I'm very excited about today's topics. We're going to talk about the Notre Dame and the coaches poll or the AP poll. We are going to talk about the Sporting News All-Americans came out, and so we're going to kind of talk about how they view Notre Dame, what it means for Notre Dame, and just give some context about the Notre Dame schedule. And then, of course, we'll dive into our two main topics today, and they kind of go hand in hand, but basically it's this. What are the five sort of areas, the sort of specific areas you say it is, like yesterday, we had some fun yesterday making our predictions for the new championship game and the college football playoff. And as I said, I had some fun yesterday, right? Like, I told y'all, look, my homer side's coming out. I just can't pick Notre Dame to lose to anybody. It was meant to be fun, not like, okay, this is my very thorough. This is if I was writing a preseason magazine, this is how it'd be. I had some fun with it. But it's also fun built around my belief in this football team and its potential. Again, that's a word that has, it's a double-edged sword type of word because potential can mean there's a lot of good things to be excited about. But normally when you're talking about potential, you're talking about things that are not established or proven yet. And that's not always a good thing. And so right now, this team is a lot about potential. But, what are five areas that I look back and say, Bryan, why are you so confident about this team? I've had people ask me, when's the last time you were this confident about a team? Well, probably 2018, maybe. You could talk about 2015 in certain areas, but other areas not so much. I didn't see 2012 coming at all. So, what makes you so confident about this team? Well, I'm going to give you the top five reasons, and some of them are going to be a little bit more broad to incorporate several different aspects. But, just looking at it and saying these are the five reasons that I am legitimately excited about this team, and not your normal every year you're always excited. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I didn't go into a season excited to find out what Notre Dame can be and think that they could be a pretty good team. And if this, and this happens, maybe they can make a deep run. This team is a little different. It's just like I have a lot more confidence. But there's also some potential stumbling blocks, and that'll be part two of the show today. Are five aspects that could potentially be stumbling blocks before Notre Dame when it comes to reaching their full potential as a program this season. What could prevent them from turning that potential into production and results? That is what I'm going to talk about today. As always, no mailbag at the end of today's show. I will answer any super chats that come along the way. So if you have something you want to say or something you want me to address, go ahead and throw a super chat in there and we'll get rocking and rolling. And also as a reminder, tomorrow we'll do the buy, sell, and hold. So there is a thread on the board about the buy, sell, hold. I'm actually going to go in there now and bump that up just to make sure it doesn't get pushed off the front page. And I'll remind everybody that we're going to do this tomorrow. And we'll get everybody squared away with the show tomorrow. So it'll be a lot of fun. So we are not going to miss out on the buy, sell, hold. We're going to do all that tomorrow. So part one of today's show is just some news, right? Obviously, Notre Dame this week, the AP poll came out. The coaches poll came out last week. Notre Dame was ranked 7th in the coaches poll, and the AP poll came out yesterday, and Notre Dame was ranked 7th in the AP poll. This marked, I believe, the 5th time out of the last 6 years that Notre Dame has started the season in the top 10. They started and I'm going to go through this a little bit. Last year, they started 13th, but the previous year they were 5th. So I'm going to kind of go over just kind of Notre Dame in the AP poll and just kind of get into some different aspects of just it's just kind of informative. It doesn't necessarily have any broad kind of topics of conversation, but I did find it interesting. There was a tweet from Brett McMurphy that I saw the other day that I found fascinating, and I don't often say that about that, but when you look at Brett McMurphy, and he had a comment, and it's something along the lines of how many years in a row that the national champion has been a team that ranked in the top 7 to start the season. So I'm actually going to pull that up here real quick and see what he said. So let me find his tweet real fast. So he said, since 2004, every national champion ranked among the AP's top 7 with 2 exceptions. Florida State was ranked 11th in 2013, and 2010 Auburn ranked 22nd. So all the way back to 2004, a span of over 20 seasons, only 2 national champions began the year outside of the top 7 in the preseason AP poll. So, again, trends, it doesn't mean anything, but it's a trend to look at. When you look at Notre Dame in the AP poll in recent seasons, last year, as I mentioned, Notre Dame began the season ranked 13th. They finished 14th, obviously climbed as high as number 9, were as low as number 22. They were number 16 going into the bowl game, beat number 19 Oregon State in the Sun Bowl, which jumped the Irish up to 14. I don't normally complain about postseason rankings because it doesn't really matter if you're number 1, but I did not understand last year's rankings, to be honest with you. I didn't understand why Notre Dame was ranked as low as they were. I definitely didn't understand. I mean, I kind of understood why they were behind Penn State, although I don't agree with it. Notre Dame and Penn State had a common opponent, and Notre Dame was far more competitive against that common opponent than Penn State was. They both had the same record, but the team that really, I thought, made no sense to be ahead of Notre Dame is that Arizona ranked 11th. And Arizona finished the year 10-3, just like Notre Dame, but they had 3 common opponents. And Arizona beat Stanford on the road 21-20. Notre Dame beat Stanford on the road 56-23. Arizona lost to USC at USC in triple overtime. Notre Dame beat USC at home 48-20. And then Arizona beat Oregon State at home 27-24. Notre Dame beat Oregon State 40-8. I don't put as much stock in that one because that was not the same Oregon State team that Arizona played in the regular season. That's fair. That's fine. But they still stomped that team, and Notre Dame was missing a lot of guys from that game as well. So I didn't understand why Arizona's ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I thought Notre Dame should have been 12th, but at the end of the day, who cares? If you're 14th or 12th, you're not number 1, and you're not in the top 5, and that's really kind of what matters. 2022, Notre Dame began the season ranked 5th and dropped all the way out of the top 25 after the first 2 games. And that was after the loss to Ohio State and Marshall. Didn't get back in until November when they beat Clemson, and then, of course, climbed up to number 15, won their bowl game over number 19 South Carolina. Notre Dame was, I believe, 21st going into the bowl season, and beat South Carolina, who was ranked 19th, which jumped the Irish up to 18. In 2021, Notre Dame began the preseason ranked 9th and finished the season ranked 8th. In 2020, Notre Dame began the season ranked 10th and ended the season ranked 5th. So back-to-back years where Notre Dame actually ranked higher than they began, for those who say that Notre Dame is constantly overrated. 2019, they began the year 9th, ended 12th. 2018, they began 12th, finished 5th. 2017, they were not ranked at all, finished 11th. 2016 was the complete opposite. They began the season 10th, finished unranked. 2015, they began at 11th, ended at 11th. Again, I felt that was too low, but at the end, it doesn't matter. 2014, they began 17th and finished unranked. 2013, they began 14th and ended 20th. 2012, they began unranked, finished the season's 4th. 2011, they began 16th, finished unranked. And in 2020, they began unranked and were never ranked at any point in time in the season. So that is Notre Dame's recent history with the AP poll. I don't really care to get into the debate over, Notre Dame's always overrated. That's an emotional fan reaction, and it really doesn't require much of a response because, as I pointed out, that's just not true. And it's just not really something I really feel like discussing today or diving into today. So that is Notre Dame in the coaches poll. They do begin 7th. It doesn't have a huge impact on the postseason and the college football playoff as much as it used to, obviously. But I do think perception matters. I do think perception of what a team is does impact the college football playoff rankings to a degree, even though they don't look at it and say, hey, AP has them here, we should rank them there. I do think there's a perception of where teams are ranked, not just Notre Dame, but also their opponents that factors into it. And when you look at the AP poll, Notre Dame begins the season against number 20 Texas A&M. So a road game against a ranked opponent is how you start your season. The number 10 team in the country, according to both polls, is Florida State. Florida State comes to Notre Dame on November 9th. If Florida State only has one loss by then, they're most likely still a top 10 caliber team. Although if you look at Florida State's schedule, there's at least a decent chance that they're going to be undefeated when they come into Notre Dame Stadium on November 9th this season. You look at their schedule, there's certainly some challenging games that Florida State has to contend with in order to get to that point. They kick the season off with a game in Ireland against Georgia Tech. I think Florida State wins that game, but it's not going to be a cakewalk. They play BC in week 2, then they get a bye, then they play a really good Memphis team in week 3. I have Memphis in the college football playoff as the group of 5 representative. They play Cal, who's got some I think it's going to be a little bit feistier than people think, at SMU. It's a really good football team, and then home against Clemson. So the start to their season, there are not a lot of cakewalks on the schedule for Florida State, but I think they win them all. They get most of them at home. The only true road game they have is against SMU. Then they have a bye. Then they play at Duke. Should be a win. This Duke team's not as good as last year's Duke team. This is the big game right here that could determine whether or not Florida State is a top 10 team when they come to Notre Dame Stadium. I think this is important for Notre Dame. If Notre Dame has a loss, a game like this is going to be huge. They need Florida State to be a top 10 team if Notre Dame has a loss. If Notre Dame goes undefeated, it doesn't matter. They're going to be the 5 seed. I mean, there's no possible way that there's another group of 5 undefeated team. I don't think there's a scenario. I mean, there's always the outside chance that 3 teams from a conference finish undefeated and one of them doesn't get into the playoff. Maybe. I mean, into the conference title game. Maybe. That's highly unlikely. It's a little more likely now with the bigger leagues because there's more chances that certain teams don't play each other as there used to be. Like, back in the day when the Big Ten was only 10 teams, it was not possible for 2 teams to go undefeated in the Big Ten. It just wasn't possible because everybody played each other. A little bit more possible now, highly unlikely. So the odds are if Notre Dame's undefeated, it doesn't matter what Florida State could be 0-8 coming into that game, and it wouldn't matter. Notre Dame will be a 5 seed. But if there is a loss on Notre Dame's docket, or let's say the schedule hasn't been as good as I think it's going to be, and they kind of need that boost, or maybe there's not as much chaos as I think that there is, and they kind of need that boost, it's huge for Notre Dame if Florida State's a top 10 team when they come into Notre Dame Stadium on November 9th. Obviously, they got to avoid getting upset in those first 5 games. They've got to make sure they beat Clemson at home. That's not going to be easy. And then you've got Miami on October 26th at Miami. It's going to be a huge game. Huge game. This is going to be a talented Miami team. A Miami team that's going to have their own battle the week before. They play at Louisville the week before. They also play at Cal. They also play Virginia Tech at home. They play at Florida. So we're going to know a lot about those 2 football teams when they play. And then, of course, Florida State the next week plays North Carolina at home. That should be a win. And then, of course, they come to Notre Dame Stadium. So Florida State was ranked 10th, and then USC, who Notre Dame ends the season with, is ranked 23rd in both polls. So that is where you are with that. So I'm going to respond to something Archer said. He said, BD, if two teams from the same conference went undefeated in the regular season, I could see the loser of that game getting the 5 seed above Notre Dame if they were ranked higher than Notre Dame going to the championship game. No, they're not going to have a 12-0 Notre Dame team ranked lower than a team that lost a conference title game. It's just, there's no way that happens, in my opinion. No way. But to your point, this is also why it is important that a team like Florida State be really good, Archer. So, like, let's just say, that scenario is there, and I don't know how that happens because of who plays who this season. In the ACC, it's not really possible, in my opinion, for two teams to be undefeated unless it's a non-Miami, Florida State, or Clemson, because they play each other. In the SEC, I don't know that anybody. Like the way that it circles, it'd have to be a team that we're not expecting to be there. It can't be Oregon and Ohio State. It can't be Ohio State and Michigan. Maybe it's Oregon and Michigan. It can't be one of those two teams and Penn State because they all play each other. So the odds of it happening are very, very, very slim. But even still, if one of those two teams loses, I don't see a team that's got a loss, and most of those teams will have an FCS win. They're not going to be ranked ahead of Notre Dame, who's undefeated. It's just not going to happen, in my opinion. But to your point, is we could debate that all day. It's what ifs. We don't know. What I think we can agree on, however, is what I said is if Florida State is a top 10 team when they come to Notre Dame on November 9th, and if USC is still ranked when they play the end of the season, Notre Dame needs those two teams on their schedule to stay ranked all year, or at least be ranked when they play Notre Dame. That is going to be huge for that. Because if Notre Dame has 2 wins over ranked opponents, especially if Florida State's a top 10 team, that's going to really bolster their resume, because the committee is made up of human beings, and human beings are going to have a natural recency bias. I think the committee does a great job of trying to avoid that as much as they can, unlike the polls, which are very reactionary. There's still a recency bias to it. And I think that's something that factors into it, to why it is really important that those two teams be ranked. So you and I could go back and forth about whether they would or wouldn't. Neither of us know. You can make your case, I can make mine, but we can definitely come down the same side of saying if these two teams are ranked, that gives Notre Dame their absolute best shot of really locking down that number 5, no matter what else anybody else does. And I think that's kind of why it's important that those two teams are perceived as really good teams early in the season. Because if you're perceived as a good team and you stumble, you stub your toe a little bit early in the season, it doesn't take you as much work to get back into the top 25 as it does if, let's say, you're not perceived very highly and you then come into the season and you win some games and you're just not getting a lot of love and not getting a lot of attention. If a team that was, take Duke, for example, that Notre Dame beat last year, I think Duke was ranked 17th when Notre Dame played. If you're talking about a team that was already ranked 15th and did what Duke did the first 4 weeks, beat Northwestern, beat Clemson by 3 touchdowns, they probably are climbing into the top 10 by the time that those two teams play. And for USC fans, can I remember this? The 2016 team from USC began that season. USC was ranked 20th coming into the season, got blasted by Alabama, beat Utah State, then got blasted by Stanford, and then beat Utah. That team climbed all the way up to 9th in the polls. They only beat 2 ranked teams along the way to get there. But there was a perception that this was supposed to be a pretty good USC team, and I think that helped them climb back in. I think USC's ranking was where it should have been, but I think can be harder to climb there when you're not perceived to be good, and I think that's why those things really help Notre Dame, that these teams are ranked and that they stay ranked as the season goes on. Other bit of news from today that I thought was very fascinating is Sporting News came out with their preseason All-American team. My guy Bill Bender wrote the article. Bill's a great guy. If you guys have not watch the CFB Nation channel. They do a show over there. They recorded today. We're going to put the 2 segments up for tomorrow. They broke down their All-American team, their preseason top 25, and some other topics today. So that'll be on the CFB Nation channel tomorrow. Bill does a great job. Very fair. I think they try to do right with their All-American rankings, but it matters. Their All-American rankings matter because Sporting News is one of the 5 what are considered the main All-American teams. And by that, I mean those are the 5 that determine whether you're a consensus or unanimous All-American. There's a lot of other, ESPN has one, The Athletic, CBS Sports. There's all types of All-America teams, but it's Sporting News, it's Associated Press, it's Walter Camp, it's the Football Writers Association of America, and the American Football Coaches Association. Those are the 5 All-American teams that make up whether you're unanimous or consensus. Obviously, last year, Joe Walton, Xavier Watts were unanimous, which meant they were first team on Sporting News, and then the other 4. Notre Dame had 5 players that were named All-Americans by CBS Sports, by Sporting News today, and they were 3 on the first team, 1 on the second team offense, and then 1 on the second team special teams. So Notre Dame was obviously a team that was very well represented on that list. You know what I did not do? I did not go look and see how many each team had. I'm actually going to kind of do that as we're talking. I'm seeing if Bill wrote about that. He said, looks like Ohio State had the most. Ohio State's had 7 players on their All-America team. Notre Dame was second with 5. That was more than Alabama and Georgia, who each had 4. Michigan, Oregon, and Texas each had 3. So Notre Dame had the most first team All-Americans All-Americans total. And here's an interesting thing, reading through Bill's note, Ohio State had the most, but 5 of their 7 were second team players. And Georgia, looking at Georgia's list, 2 of Georgia's 4 were on the first team. So that means the other 2 were on the second team. And Alabama, Alabama had, they had their center, the transfer from Washington, Caleb Downs, and a kicker. So Bama had 3 on their first team as well, including a specialist. So Notre Dame and Michigan and Alabama looks like tied for the most first teamers. And so that's a very interesting statistic, and it's kind of a bit of a secret, like a prequel, right? A preview, so to speak, of the topic I'm going to get into today. When I talk about how talented this Notre Dame team is, guys, this isn't just me, a Notre Dame fan, a Notre Dame analyst, a Notre Dame podcaster, all the different hats that I wear. That's just hyping up his team. This is outsiders film. So ESPN has Notre Dame ranked 5th. You talk about the Walter Camp preseason All-American list. They had 4 guys on there. They had Xavier Watts, Howard Cross, Benjamin Morrison, and Jaden Harrison. Others had 5, with Mitchell Evans being the 5th on other preseason lists. So this isn't just Irish Breakdown saying, hey, we're excited about this team, but nobody else is. There's a lot of excitement about it. And the fact that 5 guys made the preseason Sporting News list. And I know that team. I know their process a little bit. I've talked to their guys about their process in the past. They do a lot of research. They ask people questions. They want data. So, for example, I know for a fact that one of the factors that went into the decision-making for their first-team All-America cornerbacks, of which Benjamin Morrison is one. I should have led with this. The 3 first-team All-Americans for Notre Dame were Howard Cross, Xavier Watts, and Benjamin Morrison. Second team was Mitchell Evans, a tight end, and Jaden Harrison as a kick returner. But I know for a fact that one of the things that they factored into for having Benjamin Morrison on the first team was looking at his Pro Football Focus numbers, where he was in completion percentage, numbers for targets, and all that kind of stuff. They took into account how he handled Marvin Harrison Jr. the last 2 years. So they do their research, and I really respect that and appreciate that. I actually texted one of their guys today, and I was like, thank you for putting Travion Henderson on the All-American squad and not Quinshon Judkins, because that tells me that they're not going with what the the hype is they're going with the guy that they feel is the better player and that they project to have a better year. And I tend to agree with them. But I think TreVeyon Henderson is a significantly better running back than Quinshon Judkins if he can just stay healthy. That's going to be the big thing for TreVeyon. But it is still a big honor for Notre Dame to have 3 first-team All-Americans on the defense. And obviously you have two other players on the second team. As I said, perception matters a lot, folks. It does. It matters when it comes to the human factor of rankings. It matters when it comes to the perception among, with recruits, the perception within your program, the expectations. Guys have to know what the expectations are. And there's just a lot of different ways where the perception matters. And when you talk about Notre Dame being a consensus top 10 team, you talk about Notre Dame having more preseason All-Americans than Georgia or Alabama or Michigan or Oregon or Texas, you start to understand why there's the excitement that there is for Notre Dame. Now Notre Dame needs to go out there and back that up. That's going to be the final step for this. But quite an honor for Xavier Watson, Benjamin Morrison, and Howard Cross, and Mitchell Evans and Jaden Harrison. Quite an honor. And the crazy thing, you want to talk about how much talent Notre Dame has. Jaden Harrison's, by everyone that I've seen, is either a first or second team preseason All-American as a kick returner. He does not have the highest kick return average for a Notre Dame returner from last year. Jadarian Price does. It just kind of speaks to the kind of playmakers that Notre Dame has. But it also shows, when that list shows kind of why Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, Oregon, Texas are all considered teams that are going to be really good football teams this year, because there are a lot of those All-American type of players. And if you want to know why some people still have Michigan as being a top 10 to 15 team, it's right there. It speaks to it. They've got 3 guys in the first team All-America squad, Will Johnson, Mason Graham, and then of course their tight end, Colston Loveland. And I was actually asked this by somebody recently, like, would I have Mitchell Evans as my first team All-American or Colston Loveland? And I said, I'd have Colston Loveland as my first team All-American, just because I don't know that I'd say he's more talented than Mitchell Evans, but he's certainly more proven, and he proved that he can stay healthy. And when you got 2 pretty good players, that has to matter. And I thought he was pretty clutch last year as well. He was a money player, just like Mitchell Evans was. So that is the preseason All-America discussion. That's just some news that I wanted to get out there to you guys. And it's just another bit of evidence that tells us why Notre Dame is considered such a team that has a chance to really make a run. And I'm going to dive more into that in segment 2 of today's show, which is going to be looking at the reasons to be optimistic about this Notre Dame football team. But before I get there, do me a favor, folks. If you have not already done so, hit that like button for me. Make sure you have subscribed to our channel. Make sure that you are turn your notification bells on so you they let you know when we put new shows up. Just to give you guys a heads up as well, we are starting to cut these shows up. We've always done it on our podcast platform, and you can subscribe to our podcast. Apple's, our partners at Spotify, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can subscribe to us there. That's always a great way of supporting our channel. Financially, it definitely does a lot better for us than the YouTube channel does, but we love both of them. But you can always listen to our show on our podcast, and we've always cut them into segments there. We're also starting to do that on our videos. So we're actually starting to take the videos and cut them up by segment. So this first segment will get broken down and put out by itself. This next segment about the reason to be optimistic will be cut up, put out by itself. So you guys can, if you want to go back, you don't have to listen to this whole show again. You can listen to the smaller segments and put them out that way, or check them out that way. So we are starting to do that as well. They usually go up the next morning. So we do a show today, we'll put this one up the next morning, and that's usually how we're going to be doing it from now on. So if it's something that's a little bit news breaking, then we will try to get that up a little bit quicker, but that's kind of what our plan is going to be. So you can find the segments broken up a little bit more on our video podcast. For these types of shows, we won't do it for like mailbag or buy sell holds. Those will just kind of be what they are. We'll still break them up on the podcast platform, but not the video. But we're going to start breaking these things up and starting to give you guys a little bit smaller doses of it, so you can consume it a little bit easier when you go back on the rewatch. So I just want to let you guys know that. And you can, of course, find that by being a subscriber and making sure you've hit that notification bell for our podcast. And as always, if you really, really want to be a part of our community as deep as you can and get all the intel, all the scoop, including stuff we don't talk about in the podcast, you can sign up for a message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You can be a monthly subscriber. We are cheaper than anybody else. You can do an annual subscription, also cheapest. Or if you really want to go above and beyond, you can become a subscriber. You can become a part of our booster club. We have a Shamrock Club, a Blue Club, and a Gold Club. If you join one of those clubs, you also get some free IB merch. If you join the Shamrock or Blue Club, you get a free IB Club mug. Only goes to club members. I don't even have one. It's only club members. I have no Gold Club gear, no Gold Club shirts, no IB Club mug. That only goes to subscribers. If you join the Gold Club, you get not only the mug, but you also get an IB Gold Club t-shirt. We have them in 5 different colors. It has this logo on it, and it'll either, if you get green, it'll have this blue logo on it. If you get one of the other colors, it'll have the green logo on it. And then underneath right here, it'll say Gold Club right under here. So and those again only go to Gold Club members. So it's just a way that you can support us. We greatly appreciate it. And then of course you get some cool merch to go with it as well. I'm also working on revamping the merch store. So I'm hoping to have some new merch on there and just have some things rearranged and organized there as well. So you can check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com.